So you got these really edgy young lads, bright orange hair, platforms, crazy ass flares, pottering around, looking to be violent, no eyebrows. It's a funny one, my sort of connection to this place, because well, first off, my son Niall was coming in here, and he, you know, and Niall's got a keen interest in the clothing that Rivet Hide were doing, and so he told me about it, and he said, you know, I'd like the people who were involved in it, but also I used to know the previous business that was here, which was an art gallery, and it was here for quite a long time, so I knew the building, and I really liked the space. We'd heard that Rivet Hide had taken over it. I think it's really a stretch to say it was actually like a relief, really, that this really great shop was actually going to find a new lease of life with people who were, this was before I even saw it, and I just said, listen, the clothes are cool and the people behind it are really cool, you like them. I was like, oh, that's great. And the good old gallery's turning, it's got a new lease of life, as I say. That would have been about, I don't know, I mean, you guys would know, Danny might know, about 6-7 years ago or something, maybe longer now. The environment that I grew up in, like clothes-wise, was very obsessive and a lot of attention to detail. By definition, it was streetwear. It was like what other kids was wearing on the street. So where there was tons of kids, working class kids, everyone was really into expressing themselves through clothes. There's always a discourse about street culture and football, which was definitely the case in Manchester, particularly in the early 70s. So your Chelsea fan was in, generally speaking, like Clockwork Orange with a white boiler suit and the boiler hat and everything, which I never really quite got. But I would see, I'd be in town on a Saturday, Piccadilly Gardens here, just looking at these football fans. I started to go to City matches then, but the United fan was, there was a movement with United fans where they looked like David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust. So you got these really edgy young lads, bright orange hair, platforms, crazy ass flares, pottering around, looking to be violent, no eyebrows. That made it really freaky. So it was odd because it was such macho, aggressive culture, but they're walking around looking like it, so androgynous. It was a really striking kind of thing. I mean, there's no other walk of life in Western culture anyway, and post-war culture or whatever, where you're going to see that other than young people wanting to dress up on the street. It's a million miles away from the catwalk. It's a million miles away from fashion houses of Paris, or indeed Carnaby Street. Because the other thing as well is, like, about Manchester, of course, I've been asked about it for 40 years now, but about the music culture in Manchester, but it's always linked, there's a strong link to clothes shops, of course, and music and fashion. Manchester for years and years had more clubs per capita than any other city in Europe, bar none. And that obviously affected the music scene, and then the music scene obviously is hand in hand with the street fashion. So if you're in a city that has got more clubs than anywhere else in Europe, then you've got more people dressing up, and you've probably got more clothes shops because of that. Think of a band like Stone Roses, for example. I mean, when you think about them, you think about the way they all look like a band. It's in the same way as Small Faces did, or the Smiths did, or Oasis, or Arctic Monkeys, or Franz Ferdinand, or right up to right now, it's today's culture. So you find that, I say it's a simple way of putting it, but most musical artists look the way they sound. I've seen this almost like a lineage of starting off from when I was a little kid with the mods, going right the way through glam rock. And there's all these little subcultures that I could name. Soul Boys, Perry Girls, Alt Street, New Romantics. Now I started working in clothes shops, selling certain kinds of clothes. And you got the indie scene, and then you had rave, and then all of these things present opportunities to, well, establishments like Rivet Hide. When was it set up, this store? What year was it? Was it 2019? Yeah. Is that right? So, you know, and having worked in clothes shops myself and been around those kind of enterprises, I always have my fingers crossed anyway, that because it's quite an ambitious venture, you know, particularly in this day and age. If you want to do stuff that's of real quality, the pressure's obviously on, you know, because the aesthetic is expensive and there's a lot involved to get it right, you know. So there's an economic kind of challenge, and then, you know, whether just how it's going to go, and it's gone great. So I had that interest in the place, even just as a customer and just as someone who was interested in all the things we've been talking about, Manchester's clothing culture developing. And I mean, when I saw the clothes, I knew there was no problem on that score, but you just don't know how things are going to go. So I've been really pleased that it's been so long now that it's going here for all those reasons: the space, the clothes, the people behind it. You know, they've always been really, really cool people in here. And yeah, when you see a lot of people in Manchester wearing this stuff, you know. Well, I knew about Momotaro jeans because a mate of mine had hit me up to those. He plays in the Killers, and he you know, he was sort of saying, "Oh, you're going to really like that stuff." And I just got chatting to it was James who was in here at the time, and the guys were just really friendly and also very enthusiastic. I suppose nothing's really changed because, you know, being a boy of a certain type, you know, see another lad and go, "Oh, they look really good," you know. I'm glad that that's never changed, you know. But I like the identifiable. It's such a simple thing, but I do like the battle stripes. I like the identifiable thing. Sometimes that doesn't always work for me, but if it does sort of speak to me, I kind of go, "Oh, I really like that kind of little detail, that identifiable thing." But now also because I'm little, the fit just seemed right. Not all stuff looks right when you play the guitar, and that's as any self-respecting musician will tell you, that it has to be a consideration. If you're little, you know, some stuff just doesn't make the guitar look right. So you know, it's not just about what you play. As I said, it's not just about the music. But also, I was very fortunate because, you know, the owner Danny arranged with Momotaro to get me some black ones with the battle stripes after they'd done. I was after the jacket, and I'm a bit obsessive like that. I think most people who are into clothes are. You know, once I get into something, I sort of have to really take it to the nth degree then. But also with doing what I do, it's quite nice because you get feedback straight away from fans who want to know, where'd you get those from? For what I like, there's been one item that runs right the way from the late 50s all the way through everything that I've been interested in, and that's the moccasin. Right. In my days in the Smiths, the very first time I did Top of the Pops, I couldn't get actual proper moccasins, so I had to get some slippers from Marks and Spencer's. I think it was Marks and Spencer's, and then the very first Top of the Pops, I'm wearing like slippers that I pushed all the fur in because they were like moccasins, and the flowers are being swung around and swung around and swung around, and I realised on the live TV you couldn't walk in these. They were so slippy because they didn't have a proper sole. I thought, it's my first ever television appearance, I'm going to slip. So that's why I'm stood to the spot. So that's how into moccasins I was, you know. But I think it goes back to Jack Kerouac and Ferlinghetti and the beats of the poets of San Francisco in the late 50s, which I know sounds incredibly pretentious, but it is true. The shops that I worked in a few shops in the late 70s and early 80s, and the Smiths sort of came out of a shop that me working in this place called X Clothes, which was its own, I wouldn't say family business, but the owners, somewhat like Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood, it was a couple who made their own clothes, manufactured their own clothes, designed their own clothes, but we also sold other brands of the similar ilk. So I know what that culture is. And the guy who helped me get the Smiths together owned the Crazy Face shop next door to that. So it's a whole other story. But he used to manufacture on Portland Street. He had a big 3-4 story building that had all machinists working in there. And the Smiths used to rehearse in the middle of all the cutting tables and massive like denim sewing machines and all of that. It's where we rehearsed all our early songs. So the band grew up around that. Very first rehearsal we ever had was in the shop that was in the basement, surrounded by all the stock. So I'm no stranger to that. My musical story was synonymous with it. In the same way as like Glenn Matlock from Sex Pistols, who's a mate of mine, he was a Saturday boy at first in the Malcolm McLaren and Vivian Westwood's shop, and the band came about from the shop, you know. Clothes shops have just got that thing, haven't they, where the first thing that happens when you go in, or should happen when you go in a decent clothes shop, is that the music should be good. So I just saw the same thing here, you know, that which is kind of classic, which is the people working here were genuinely passionate and knowledgeable about what they were selling, and the music that they were playing, in my experience, sort of goes with the clothes, really. You know, there's a lot of stuff in the Pacific Northwest. There was a lot of guitar music, you know, whether it was Bon Iver or Modest Mouse, or I think the first time I came in here, they were playing television, which was very impressive. So I'm a bit of a romantic about this stuff, you know. It means a lot to me from being a kid. It's always been all part of the same sort of universe for me. See, music, the environment that you work out of, for me, is very important. So my studio is maybe it's about 10 miles away from here, and it's top, you know, people who follow me know this, it's at the top of an old factory, an old mill. And I'm there for a number of reasons, but it informs the music. Rivet Hide and what we're talking about, in that way, they're you know, it's coming from the same place as a musician, really, in that the environment it's not just for the look. There's a sort of a worldview, really, or there's an environment and there's an aesthetic, obviously, that is really important. You know, Danny, the owner here, for Danny, this, not only is he passionate about the clothes, but he's passionate about the space being right. It's about having an aesthetic, really. If this collection of clothes was on the high street, it just wouldn't feel right. The whole thing is it's a sort of almost like a way of life, really. It's a lifestyle. Well, I'm often asked, being a musician over the years, you know, I've been around so long now, that I must, this kind of leading question about tribalism no longer being a thing, but I think it is a thing. I think it used to be more prevalent in music maybe 30 years ago when I started out. The subcultures were a bit more obvious because music was more obvious. There are other distractions, and that's a whole other conversation. But tribalism or factionalism, which is a good word, I think is definitely there. I think people who work in certain professions want to look like they work in that profession. It's not just to do with people who want to be fashionable. Because really, is when you start talking about clothes, the assumption is that someone who's into clothes is therefore vain. But there's loads of reasons why you would be into clothes beyond vanity. There's plenty of people who are like really super into the clothes who aren't actually vain. You know, it's something they enjoy. It's expression, all these things we're talking about. It's design. It's a bit of a sense of community and inclusivity, is it? It's quite a nice feeling, particularly in this day and age of where everyone's, you know, all day long we're all living with the consequences of division. You know, it's nice to think about these things, really. All in a pair of jeans, you know what I mean?